No, I did it to you.
Better than nothing, right?
I don't know. Anybody has white paper they want to
All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And I use that term loosely. Welcome to the Narberth Civic Association Meet the Candidates Night. As you know, or maybe you don't know, we have a primary election coming up on May 20th, Tuesday, May 20th. And the Narberth Civic Association, as it has done for every borough council election, certainly since I've been living in Narberth, and it's since the 90s, has had either a candidates forum or a debate where there are contested elections, and therefore we are having a Meet the Candidates Night. We are having it early in April because we have mail voting. And soon after tonight's meeting, you could presumably get a mail ballot and vote by mail by the end of the month. So that's an option, and that's why we're having it early. Let me talk to you a little bit about what our procedure is going to be tonight. First, we are going to hear opening statements from the candidates. They will be hopefully limited to about 4 minutes. And then I am going to ask them questions that we have developed in both the board of the Narberth Civic Association, and some of them have come to us through the website. Then we're going to take a short break. We're going to have you have an opportunity to ask questions from the floor, and the candidates will answer, and you can ask anybody anything. The only thing I'm going to ask you is that to be civil and to not embarrass people. I know that is a quaint notion these days, but that's sort of the way we are in Narberth. And then after we have a time for questions from the floor, we're going to have closing statements from the candidates, and those will be about 2 minutes each. Okay, well, we have, and I'm going to hopefully get names right without even looking at the name cards. Cindy Rickards, Fred Bush, Dana Edwards, Mike Salmonson, Joe, it should be Straighten, but it's Stratton. Okay, and what we're going to do, I think we'll go left to right, my left, your right.
Okay.
And Cindy, if you push the button, you have the floor.
My phone.
Go ahead.
Okay. Hi folks, I'm Cindy Rickards. I'm running for my 3rd term of council. It's great to see you all. Since moving to council, is this okay? Getting nervous. In 2005, I think I volunteered for every event except, oddly enough, the Easter egg hunt, which I have nothing against, the rabbit or the holiday. But it's where I've met so many different people over the years, and a lot of the people in this room through volunteering. I've served on council since 2018, and I hope that I've earned your support for a 3rd term. Over the years, I hope that you've seen me as someone who shows up and listens and follows through. While I've made mistakes, I've always done so with the best of intentions, making evidence-based decisions, trying to represent your needs, and ensuring the future of our community is in good hands. Throughout 5 managers, 2 police chiefs, a broken bridge, a closing of our anchor stores, and a global pandemic, we've weathered many ups and downs over my last 2 terms. But despite the challenges, I remain incredibly grateful for our privileged community, a community that cares, gets involved, we disagree, and as evident in this room, we engage. In a 3rd term on council, I hope to continue to be someone that you can reach out to for assistance, someone who represents your interests, and someone who supports fellow council members and borough staff. We're at a critical junction. I'm seeking re-election to follow through on the development of South Haverford Avenue, to support our small businesses through this transition, resolve the Sabine property issue, complete the bridge, and support our new manager, Maggie Dobbs. And this is a lot of change. And I've consistently advocated for us to be strategic, to appropriately scale our projects and our goals, and to be as iterative as possible with density or parking policy, which sometimes places me as an outlier. But the strength of this seated council and the future seated council lies in its dedicated, smart members who believe that dissent leads to better outcomes. You see that at the table each week. I actually sent this to my council members seated because although we may disagree sometimes, I think we all agree that we come with passion and purpose and respect one another, and we're a better community because of that. If I can zoom out, our town is not immune to the larger national issues and dynamics, including twisted truths, fake news, misinformation campaigns, and this makes council work particularly challenging when we're faced with false accusation and personal agendas. When I teach in a jail each week, so tomorrow I will be at CFCF, it's the men's maximum security jail in Philadelphia, and I bring Drexel students there, and we, the first day of class, come up with guidelines for civil discourse. And one principle I always add is assume good intent. This approach has served me well both in life, whether it's standing in line at a grocery store, and on council, because it helps to foster an understanding and collaboration, even in difficult decisions. So at this point in our nation's history, I hope that Narberth can serve as a model of democratic engagement like we're doing here tonight, a time when we come together, set our personal differences aside, and focus on the larger critical issues that affect us all. Thanks.
Thank you. Fred?
Yeah, I see already that I made a tactical error in sitting next to Cindy, not to follow her. I moved here to Narberth when my child Cass was going into kindergarten, and they are starting next year at Harriman. So it's been 9 years, and I am I'm running for my second full term on council. I'm currently the council president, with Cindy serving as the vice president. And through that time, as Cindy alluded to, there have been all sorts of challenges and unexpected events that we've worked through as a council. I'm really proud of our pandemic response. Back when the data was still available, Narberth had one of the lowest number of infections in the county. I think we pioneered a lot of. We were one of the first to declare an emergency. Andrea Deutsch, stepped up and immediately declared an emergency. Everybody sort of pulled together, and a lot of the adaptations from the pandemic, like the outdoor dining and our Zoom meetings, our borough council meetings, and all other public meetings being live streamed. Some of those are still enhancements to the borough experience today, I think. Good changes that have come out of that. And I'm really proud of our environmental record. So one of my primary issues is helping move Narberth forward to the green energy transition. The borough is now buying electric vehicles. We've got all electric lawn equipment. We are working with other interested boroughs and looking to try to purchase green power as a collective group. We're getting inquiries from other boroughs and other municipalities. Well, how are you doing this? How's it worked out for you? So we are, and of course we've got the electric vehicle charging stations throughout the borough for residents to use. But I'm also really pleased with the way our council works together. It's a very civil group, and I think the council meetings proceed smoothly. Everybody has strong ideas, but we work together to make sure that everybody has a voice and that the outcomes, the choices that we make reflect not only council's decisions, but also residents' decisions. When we read your emails, we listen to what people have to say in public comment, or when you may find us at the Greeks, and we are here to represent you, and we're very interested to see what kind of questions you have for us tonight. So I will cut this short and pass this along.
All right, thank you. Hi, everyone. I've got a little timer here, so I won't talk too much. My name is Dana Edwards. I've lived in the borough for 4 years. Moved here with my wife, Miranda Chang. Many of you might know her. We have 3 kids. One is off college at Arizona State. One is graduated recently from Lower Merion High School, was on the rowing team. So got to spend a lot of time with that group. And then one is 1.5 years old, and he just eats a lot and yells Papa and Mama. So I look forward to the role as mayor for a couple of reasons. Number one, when I first moved here in 2021, I fell in love with the town after living up here about a month. And everyone here has created something very special, and I hope to make sure that that's preserved going on, because my 1.5-year-old son, like everyone else here in the community, really deserves that hometown feel, that really, everything that you've heard described so far and everything you've experienced today. Number two, I think that we need a lot more communication from everyone, both bi-directional, like what do you know about what's going on, what do you feel is going on, what would you like to see more of, and vice versa, kind of like where do we intend to go, what could we do. And then third, as in the role of mayor, a lot of people don't really know a whole lot about how it differentiates from other roles in local government, but it really has 3 things. Number one, it takes care of the police department. It vetoes when council can't come to, doesn't come to something that I necessarily agree with. And then third, breaks ties. So in the role of the police department and running that, really looking forward to that, because there is a lot of work to be done with the traffic around. I'm sure I'll get 1 or 2 questions on traffic. I'm happy to do my best to answer those as much as I can, and I'm sure my colleagues here will chime in as well. Number two, just really getting out there and making sure that there's a community policing plan, and what does that mean, and what is the strategy for the police department. So those are the 3 things that I'm looking forward to doing. There'll be a lot more as I talk to all of you, but looking forward to your questions, and let's just see where we go tonight. Okay, thank you.
I too have a timer. I have lived in Narberth since 2003 with my wife, who is a special ed teacher. I raised my 2 kids here. Noah is about to graduate from college. If anybody has a job for him, please let me know after this meeting. And my daughter is a sophomore at Middlebury. I am a lawyer by profession. I serve in a unique spot here because I was appointed to council, and so I always feel like people may sort of know me, but they don't really know my background. So I am a lawyer by trade. I'm the only lawyer on council, for better or for worse. And most of my career has been spent as an employment lawyer, involved in all aspects of employment law. I represent everything from Fortune 50 companies to mostly individuals, mostly on the employee side. I started my own firm in 1997 and was the managing partner until a few months ago, when I spun off from my former firm on beginning my off-ramp to retirement. I think, I have won lots of accolades as a lawyer, but I think the thing that I am most proud of is that I get more referrals from former opposing counsel than probably any other source. I think, people recognize me as playing hard but fair and being passionate, and so they're willing to put their friends and their colleagues and their, C-suite managers from their companies in my hands and trust me with them. Before getting on council, I've served on lots of boards in the community, very active in the community. I served as an adjunct professor at Penn Law School for 20 years. I was an officer along with Jim Spear on the Committee for Special Ed for about 10 years in the Lower Merion School District. I co-chaired the Ad Hoc Elementary School Curriculum Committee about 15 years ago. And then for Narberth, I served on the Civil Service Commission, actually with Cindy for a while, where I went from alternate to chair for several years, and then council appointed me to fill the vacancy from Michelle Pananopoulos in November 2023. I was interviewed, nominated, elected, sworn in, and asked to vote all within a matter of about 20 minutes. And the first thing I had to vote on was Matt West's employment law contract. And I'm an employment lawyer, so I really wanted to review that contract. And of course, I hadn't seen it before I had to vote. And the first thing I tried to do was recuse myself, and Fred informed me that I wasn't allowed to do that. I hope that that was the very last time I was unprepared for a vote on council. I've served on the Public Health and Safety Committee. We hear about the traffic all the time. I feel very strongly that we as a community together have to figure out how to get people to slow down, pay attention, and really just show common courtesy on the road. I'm also the Vice President of the Finance and Administration Committee. We've talked, Dana actually mentioned communication. I took charge, one of the priorities that we set a year ago was better communication. And so I am actually the person in charge of a new communication plan, which will include a new and hopefully more user-friendly website launched in the fall. We've revamped the weekly newsletter. If you see that Narberth spotlight at the top of the newsletter, that was my idea. I feel very strongly that that we should get to know each other better, whether it's the employees, you folks out here, all the people who volunteer in this community, or just, people who are doing cool and interesting things. I think, we can show a little more respect for each other when we actually get to know each other and not just passing a stranger on the street. So if you have somebody who you think deserves to be in that spotlight, please let us know. I think, to that communication, one of the nice things about sort of heading towards the retirement is that I have now a lot of time. I spent an hour on the phone with somebody yesterday who was expressing concerns about future development efforts. So I'm trying to make myself as accessible as possible. I actually just moved my office to Narberth, my work office, so I am right next to the movie theater and can meet anybody for coffee at any time, as I did this morning. And I'll just finish by reiterating what these other folks said, which is, I think our current council works incredibly well together. We don't always agree. You guys may think we agree all the time because we get to 7-0 votes, but primarily that's because we're doing the hard work beforehand and talking to each other and figuring out ways to compromise. I think this council actually works incredibly well together. I consider them my colleagues and friends, and I'm really optimistic for the future of the borough. And I'm hoping that you'll let me actually serve a full term.
Hi, everybody. My name is Joe Stratton. I am a candidate for the Borough Council. In case you're curious about the mystery empty seat, I believe our treasurer, tax collector, thank you, is just not here yet. I think Mike and I might move over to after we're done. But I'm really grateful to be here with you. I have lived in Narberth since 2016, but I've had a Narberth zip code since 2004. Sarah and I raised our kids over on Avon Road, just 3 blocks away from the Great American Pub, and our kids grew up as Narbs, going to all the sports activities in town, getting pizza, wandering around with all their buddies. And now at the ages of 26 and 24, whenever they're home, they say, we just love it here. And I can't believe we got to grow up here, and we've never found a place like this in all of our travels since. And that's my goal of participating in the Borough Council. Is when my kids were little, I didn't have time to taking care of them and building a career to really serve the community as I would have liked to. And now that they're grown, I'm really thrilled to be able to give back and to do everything I can, working with the council, working with the mayor, working with the borough leaders, to keep this the amazing place that my kids experienced growing up. And it's not just about my kids; it's about all of us. And I'm a by profession, I'm a physician. I'm a family physician. A lot of my career is taking care of kind of older, frail people, and one of the blessings of that is I've done a lot of home visits with people, and so I've visited many communities throughout the area, been in many people's homes, and really seen the challenges that we face as we get older. And so speaking about the great stuff of Narberth for kids and families, also thinking about for all of our residents who want to age in place and want to be here, and people love it here and they don't want to leave as they get older. And so how do we keep our community of Narberth vibrant and really meeting the needs of all of our residents, no matter what their physical abilities are? And we have activities here for older folks and right in this room, and also just thinking. I'm always thinking about how we can make sure that our sidewalks are accessible for people who are using wheelchairs and walkers, and kids on scooters and kids on bikes who aren't ready to be in the street. And how do we make them accessible for parents with strollers? And that's just one simple example of the things that we can do to make our community as wonderful and safe as possible. I do have a passion for public health and safety. I also was involved in medical research, and so really learned the value of evidence in making decisions, as Cindy alluded to earlier. And so and one of my goals is to really listen and hear and understand what everyone in Narberth would like to happen. What do we want Narberth to look like? To really evaluate that with the evidence that's available. How do we make financially viable decisions that meet the needs of the community? And for what it's worth, I'm a middle child in the middle of 3 boys, and so I think that makes me an ambassador. That all the problems that come with that, being an ambassador and looking for win-wins, and you can all use that fact against me and trying to get me to go with your side of an argument. But I love listening. I love being out there. I love talking with people. Georgette and Martin on opposite sides of me, they will know that it's hard for them to get from their car to their house without having to talk to Joe. So and so I really love whether it's a farmer's market or being out in town or being at the sports events, just listening. And but now I'm talking, so I'm going to stop. Thank you very much.
Go ahead and hold on to the mic, because we'll ask the questions going the opposite direction, then we'll move back. So the first 2 questions are really softball. Sit back and relax. Then we'll get to the hard ones. Why do you want to serve on Borough Council? What skill sets do you bring? What committees do you want to serve on?
Thank you. I'll try not to repeat myself. The reason I want to serve on council is to keep Narberth the amazing community that it is, and to help it grow and prosper. And again, I love meeting people and getting to know what their stories are and what you want, and really meeting those needs. The skills. Also, I'll try not to repeat myself. As a physician who's interested in public health, I really look to add to our Public Health and Safety Committee and the work of everything that's happening from a public health perspective. I look to be involved in use of skills about thinking about accessibility for people of all ages and functional abilities. So those are skills in addition to, sorry to repeat myself, just I often say I've never met a stranger. Anybody I meet, I love talking with and getting to know. And so using that skill or innate problem that I have to really get to know people and understand what the needs of the community are. And in terms of committees, the Public Health and Safety Committee is one that I've been attending very frequently and really enjoy being a part of. The other things that are very interesting to me that I would love to participate in are, finance, infrastructure, and others that are focused on. Those aren't necessarily committees, boards and commissions, but to really listen and be able to advocate for, some of the boring stuff about how do we keep our sewers working so we don't have problems downstream? How do we make sure our streets are safe and things like that? Thank you.
Okay, so there were 3 parts. Why do I want to serve? I'm going to try to remember all 3. Prove I'm a good listener. And I am a middle child of 3 boys too. Things you learn. I've always had a passion for service. As I think I described in my opening statement, I have served this community and the greater school community for as long as I've been a grown-up in one way or another. My parents taught me that service to the community was important. My mother was a public interest lawyer who actually went to law school after I did, so she taught me there are second acts in life, and you can keep contributing to your community into your 50s, 60s, 70s. So it's always been, I've always contributed in some way, in some manner of service, so that's not a question. This seems like the logical place to do it. I love this community. Why wouldn't I want to continue to give back to it? Less involved in schools since my kids are out of school, so very easy to pivot here. What special skills do I bring to the table? I think being the only lawyer on council actually is important. We have to deal with contracts all the time. I was we're about to make revisions to the handbook. We're making revisions to the Human Relations Commission ordinance. I actually helped write that ordinance even before I was on council, because somebody on council came to me and said, I know this is your field, could you work on this for us? And I think that's really important. I also just think that Cindy talked about a little bit being an outlier, and I kind of feel like I have that skill too. Like I do have some different views from other people at this table here, and I'm not shy about articulating them on certain occasions. I think I can do it respectfully, and I can try and convince people. It must be that middle child thing. So I think I can bring that to the table as well. The third thing was, what committees would I prefer to serve on? I really like being on public health and safety. I served on the Civil Service Commission, so that's responsible for hiring the police officers. So I was pretty involved in that. So that's the safety aspect. The public health side, you might be surprised to know that I actually majored in history, but I got a certificate in science and human affairs and wrote my senior thesis on the influenza epidemic of 1918, which I thought was going to sit on a shelf and never be read again. And then I pulled it out and reread it at the beginning of the pandemic and saw incredible parallels between the lack of governmental response in England at the time and what happened here. Not Narberth, because as Fred said, we got ahead of the game, but generally what happened here and the distrust of science and just some amazing parallels. So I really enjoy public health and safety. I'm happy to be on finance and administration, but if I had to pick between the two of them, I'm going to arm wrestle Joe if we have to see who gets that third spot on public health and safety, because it's me and Cindy and Jen. So.
I'm going to have Dana pass the mic. Believe me, we have plenty of questions for you.
All right.
Don't feel slighted.
So I got started volunteering here at the borough because Cass was at the playground every single day after kindergarten, and just would immediately go to the playground and spend hours and hours there. And I figured, well, if I'm spending so much time here, maybe I should volunteer for the Parks and Recreation Board. So that got me started, and then the more time I spent here, the more I learned about the atmosphere and just kind of the unique culture of this place. I haven't lived anywhere quite like it. So, as I said, I have a personal goal in helping move as much as possible toward a greener future, and as well, I want to maintain the the Narberth way of life as best we can. The Mapes closed like 2 months after we moved here, so I only got a little taste of Mapes, but and we've seen other businesses close, so it's a matter of trying to maintain the community, maintain the downtown feel of the place, even as some of these beloved businesses move along. As for a skill set, so I didn't mention what I do. So I'm a professional gambler, and that entails both sort of keeping an eye out for things that are a little weird or a little hinky, and being able to just immediately notice numbers that are off or some sort of, like if you give me some sort of page with numbers on it, I'm immediately going to add them all up and think about, well, does this make sense? And I'm sure that our borough manager could tell you stories about things that are questioned or whatnot. I just questioned an MCPC report that we got the other day because the Narberth column didn't add up. So yeah, I would say a knowledge, an ability to read numbers really quickly. And then I went to a Quaker school, so we have a tradition of consensus, of making decisions as a group and trying to, as much as possible, reach unanimous decisions. And I think that works well as president of council. It's one of my goals to try to bring everyone's voice together and make sure that the laws we pass and the decisions we make are a collective decision as much as we can. It's not always possible, but that is one of my goals and I think one of my strengths. Oh, and I'm not on any committees because I'm the president.
At those kind of awkward icebreakers where you do the two truths and a lie, mine is always in 1980, I was Snoopy on a Republican committee float in New Jersey. And it's true, my father was the president of the Republican committee. And I say this, if you want more of that story, we'll meet at the Greeks. Civics was in my blood. I truly remember having a broken swing. My father made me type a letter. He said, there's a thing called a parks, and he took me to the Gloucester Township Municipal Building and had me hand it in. And it's funny, but yeah. But I say that because from small, it was you have to civically participate. You have to this day, my father says, do not complain if you are not doing something. He is 82 with Alzheimer's, and on his bed he will say, do not complain if you do not something. It's in my blood, a different color blood now, blue blood, but here and there. By day, I'm a professor of criminology and justice studies where we talk about agents of justice that reduce crime. This is not rocket science, folks. When I say we're a privileged community, we didn't have low COVID rates because we did anything special. We had low COVID rates because we have the privilege of remote working. Those of us, we did not work hourly jobs that put us in positions. We had groceries delivered. We wore masks, right? That is a measure of privilege that we have in this community that I don't take for granted. That's why we have lower crime rates, right? It's not because all the good people moved to Narberth. What can I bring to council? I'm actually the longest seated council member at this point. So I think I can bring some of that institutional history. My skill set, I think my biggest skill is not the sexiest, to be honest. I'm the yin to the yang of Fred. I serve as vice president. I said to Aaron Mudrick, put me on any committee. I'm a worker bee. Nothing but finance and administration. What was I chair of? Finance and administration. I went to Sean Metrick. I said, Sean, I got to tell you, if you were thinking of embezzlement, now's your shot, because I'm not going to catch it. Fred will. But are you agreeing that he should have?
No, Fred will.
Fred will. Anyway, what I do think I bring to complement Fred a bit is supporting our staff. With having lots of council, we get community members, council members who are really excited and bring that passion, and that's great. And I kind of have seen my role now as how do I help support the structure and the staff to scale that excitement and those projects. We've had, again, as I mentioned, 5 managers in my time. 4 of those who left went on, they got recruited to bigger, better resource townships, right? We were a stepping stone. So investing on that infrastructure and staff to make sure that we're sustainable has, I think, been my biggest skill set. Not all that exciting, but necessary, I would say.
Okay. Hold on to the mic.
Hold on. Okay.
We're just going to move back and forth. And I'll ask you to try to keep your answers to about 2 minutes. Sure. You don't have to put a timer on it.
Okay.
I mean, we're meeting you. We want to know about you. This next set of questions is about partisan politics. And I'm going to sort of combine a number of these questions just for you to make comments. Why did you seek the endorsement by the Lower Merion / Narberth Democratic Party? Why is the endorsement, the party endorsement, important to you and to voters? What role, if any, should the Lower Merion Democratic Party play in borough council elections? Would you favor legislation that would make borough council elections nonpartisan? What do you see as the strengths and weaknesses of essentially uncontested elections in Narberth?
All in 2 minutes.
Yeah, in 2 minutes, Rich?
All right, 2.5 for you. In other words, comment.
Comment on the endorsement process. Okay. You know, it's interesting because I got a phone call on Friday from the Dem committee saying, hey, the Inquirer reporter called. Do you want to speak to them? To which I replied, no, I'm in New York City with my friends. But I thought, what would I have said? And I actually drafted something and brought it. I'm not going to read this all in 2 minutes. But I talked about my role of actually lifting women up and my need to lift folks up. And I reflected on, I saw the endorsement 3 times. And I accepted that process and those results 3 times. The Democratic Party has much bigger challenges ahead of us. And I hope that everyone, particularly in this election, accepts those results of the endorsement process and we come together for the common good. I think that's critical. And I'm looking at Deb. Deb, you and I, we ran against each other 2 terms ago, 2 elections ago, and we both went through the endorsement process. And that makes us very vulnerable. And Deb stayed in, she ran, and she hustled, understanding that's a really hard election to win if you don't get the endorsement. And I applaud her for that. And then she later ran to be a committee member. So within those questions were, what do I think about the endorsement? I actually rely on the endorsement as a Democratic voter. I wish I had the time to research school board members the way that I wanted, or judges the way that I wanted. I wish that I had time to research council members the way that I wanted, but sometimes I simply don't. And I rely on those committee members to do their due diligence. And when I asked for the endorsement, I accepted that process. Again, I've done it 3 times. I've accepted the process and the results 3 times. As a voter, I depend on that committee. There was like 10 others in there, but is that enough?
It's okay.
Well, when I was younger, I was actually a member of the Green Party and not the Democratic Party. Yeah, not a surprise. But you know, as I thought about it a little more, I realized the importance of the Democratic Party institutions and just the fact that once I moved out of New York State to a swing state, it's just so much more important that the Democratic Party as a whole, be strong in the state. Just because the stakes are so high. I mean, if the statewide elections had gone a different way, I mean, the stakes are so high that I think that supporting the local Democratic Party and supporting the local democratic process is essential. And I think that's really all I have to say. It's just. I think that the national elections have showed us how important it is to work with the Democratic Party and to build it as much as possible.
Go ahead, Dan.
Oh, I get to talk this time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a feeling I might talk for this one. So I entered the race mid to late January. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't know much about the process, just being very upfront about it. And I didn't know about the different types of endorsements. I didn't know about the different things that happened. But I learned everything as quickly as I could. And I would say that after that process, I still support the endorsement process. I think there are pros and cons to it. Happy to dig into little subtleties along all those lines at any point with anybody who wants to talk about it. But I would say this. The nation needs everybody to really push together to make sure that we get some of the things that are going on reversed. There are litigation trackers. If you want to see all of those, you can see sort of what's been happening. There's some small progress around that, and I hope that we make a lot more progress, but I will leave that to that, and happy to talk about that during the break. The endorsement process, for those, I didn't know what I was going to be getting into, but there were 90 people on the DCLMN, and during the months of January, February, and into March, I went through about roughly 75 interviews with individuals, asking every single question that you could ever imagine, plus about 50 more. And some were polite questions and some were not. And so what I would say is I feel very vetted, to say the least. And you know, I do appreciate the question. I do understand some of the reason people might want to know more. I would love to talk more about it, but at this point what I would say is, having gone through the process, having gone through a large number of very detailed, like been under the microscope for multiple months, I trust the process. I believe that there needs to be improvements to it, of course, because we've come a long way as people. But I do believe that it is something that we need to get behind and just move forward with it. That said, I do want to state that in January when I started, I was completely for open primary. And after having gone through all of what I went through, I believe that there's value in both an open primary and in the endorsement process, but today I would be standing behind the endorsement process that exists. Happy to give more on that too if you need.
Mike?
Now I'm going to take a slightly different tack because I think these folks have already addressed the endorsement process. Part of your question was about partisan politics, and one thing I feel very strongly about is once we are sitting in that room across the hall, it's Narberth. We're all elected Democrats. I joke about being in the People's Republic of Narberth. But I also feel like we have a responsibility to, the day after the election, we're all Narberthians. We're not Republicans, we're not Democrats. One of the things that I mentioned about being recommended by opposing counsel, 3 people wrote me a recommendation letter when I was up for appointment to council. The person I'm most proudest of writing a letter from, and I won't say his name because he might get in trouble, is the Republican committee person for my ward, who I sat outside election. You know, if you know me, I've been working the election in N1 for as long as I've lived here. And my fellow, well, he actually was an opposing counsel of mine. That's how we met originally. He actually wrote a letter to these folks saying, I want Mike on council. If you're gonna, there were 3 people. I think, he is, if you gotta have a Democrat, I'd like it to be him. And I really took that to heart. I sort of jokingly saw him at the train station and said, you're not going to believe this, but I'm going to get on council. And he's like, it has to be somebody, it better be you. And I said, well, if you really believe that, you can write a letter to these guys and do it. And he did it. And I'm really proud of that. And I think that, we have to be community first, politicians second, and Republican, Democrat, Green, or other third. The day after the election, because it's the only way we're going to be successful. And I would love to, put the bubble around Narberth and keep us out of the national partisan politics. But at the same time, as I feel like as the Gulf widens, it becomes in some ways more critical for us for me as a Democrat, to recognize traditional Democratic values and try and hold to them. So.
Thanks. I agree with many things that have been said, and just to touch on 2, Danny used a word that I had in mind, which is vetting. I believe in vetting processes. I believe that when I apply for jobs, when I apply for other positions, there's a group, typically a group of experts, who are evaluating the candidates and thinking who seems like they are the best fit for the role. We had an interview process with the DCLMN, And I thought the questions were really important, and that was I was really happy to engage in that process. You know, just like being here and having knowledgeable people ask questions, and then regarding partisan politics, I won't repeat all that Mike said. I thought it was right on target, and for me, I want to serve Narberth. I want to serve the citizens of Narberth. For me, you know, to be part of the leadership of Narberth's government, it would really be about serving all the citizens of Narberth. And so, you know, I agree with what Mike shared there. I'll stop. Thanks.
Keep them up.
I promised you that we would have some more difficult questions. So here we go. What is your position with respect to 201 Sabine Avenue, Narberth Elementary School?
I'm not on council. I've been to council meetings. I've read up a lot on 201 Sabine, and really important issue. We have a park there. We have buildings there. There's real importance of maintaining parkland there, and for all the important community aspects of recreation. And, you know, as I mentioned, my kids love growing up here and having the parks, and for that, and also, you know, being very thoughtful about the financial tax base and revenue for Narberth. And so I support coming up with the best decision to balance both of those aspects of the 201 Sabine property. And I, again, as someone who's not on council yet, I don't have more specific answers at this time, other than to be involved in making really thoughtful, considered decisions that meet the needs of Narberth in the best way possible.
Mike?
You know, the question, I think, presumes that we've already formed an opinion as to what the right answer is. People have already talked about database decision making, and we don't have all the data to make a decision on that yet. And I'm going to be really blunt. Everybody's made this big to-do about the potential of valuation of these parcels that we're looking at. I'm the one who demanded that we get those valuations, because I don't know whether we're talking about giving up an asset that's worth $50,000, $500,000, or $5 million. And we have to balance our fiscal responsibility with what everybody would desire. Everybody would love to turn that into parkland corner to corner. I don't know anybody on council who doesn't want to do that if we could. If we can. If somebody wants to donate $5 million, it's a done deal. Anybody in the room, we don't have $5 million to do it. We've got to tear down that building. There's cost to that. We're losing the rental property. There's the rental value of that property. There's a cost to the taxpayers to that. Whether we can turn it into a park, and whether we're going to develop some part of it that under every single council, for as long as I've been going to council meetings, has said, there will not be less parkland than there is today. It may be configured differently, but it's not going to be less. Let me repeat that again, because I can't stand the fact that people keep making this misinformation campaign. We reiterated 3 weeks ago, no matter what plan is adopted, there will not be less parkland. That is a non-negotiable for any of us. Whether something else gets developed on that property in lieu of the school, or whether the school gets adapted or readapted for a new use, is an open question. But we don't have the data to make those decisions yet. So I think it's actually premature to respond to this question, except to say we're waiting on the data.
I'm going to respond, though. I appreciate the passion, and I've only been here 4 years, but what I can say is this. I'm a dad, I'm a community member, and, you know, I love the environment as well. I spent the first 10 years of my life in a very less than Narberth wealthy area. I grew up in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and we didn't have a whole lot. We spent all of our time at the park, or at school, or cleaning. A lot of cleaning goes on in the house there. And what Sabine Park means to me right now, again, before we get the data, before we get more analysis, which I do agree with, Mike, what it means to me is it's a representation of all of that, like everything that I grew up with and everything that this place could be. And, you know, I want my son, sorry, I get a little emotional when I think about him. I want him to grow up in a place with a lot of green space, and I want him to have a life very similar to what I had. And I want the best for him, and I want the best for our community. And I would love to see corner to corner green. I don't know if that is feasible or not, but I can tell you that my heart and my brain right now are corner to corner green, but I do want to see more information on that. And it's all because of what I think we could be. I think we need more green space. I think for the size of Narberth, we should have more green space, more parkland. Sorry, when I say green space, I meant parkland there. That has a lot of different meanings to different people, but more parkland. So my heart is there, my brain is currently there, but I'm gonna review the data with everyone, and I'm gonna help come to a good conclusion on that. Thanks.
Yeah, council passed a resolution a few years ago affirming that we want to expand, preserve, and if possible, expand the green space on the property. Right now it's about 2/3 school and parking lot, and former school and parking lot, and 1/3 park. And it's just a matter of figuring out how expensive it's going to be to do various options. The rental nets the borough about $300,000 a year. If we were to lose that income, if we weren't going to replace it in any way, I mean, taxes would have to go up. Taking down the building and turning it into a park is another $1 million plus project. That's just turning it into like a pasture. So that would also involve borrowing. So it's a matter of figuring out what is financially responsible for the borough. And we're working right now to get the numbers on what developing a portion, taking down the existing building and developing a portion of the property, what the net result would be for the borough. So we're getting to the point where we can make a decision. But like I said, the places that we're coming from is we would like to expand the green space, but we also recognize that we are stewards of the borough's finances, and everybody in the community has a stake in taxation. So we have to figure out what's the fiscally and community approach that we should be choosing. So that's what we're weighing right now.
I'm going to try to be really quick with 2 minutes. This could be a case study on why municipalities should not be landlords. There's very good reason why this does not happen, right? The amount of staff and council time spent on leasing issues on the Sabine property. Again, remember, the park is only a sliver. And in fact, when we did the master park plan, Michael and Jean headed this up. Sabine Park was actually the last park. People reported going to Shortridge and General Wayne before they reported going to Sabine Park. So when we talk about green space, we should really be intentional about open space versus parks, and that important data point. Also, I'm going to point to my council colleague, Michael, who said a lot of times, hey, this is borough property, so let's think strategically. We've said multiple times we're going to keep or increase the green space, but let's think about what opportunities do we have on this borough property. Perhaps maybe all open space isn't the wisest choice, which is why we said, let's get this assessed and see what else reflects this. Okay, $5.6 million in deferred maintenance when I first got on council for Sabine. Add a pandemic, we've replaced a roof, we have a daycare in there, which poses some different problems. We had a pandemic, so leasing office space is no longer really as valuable. And we have this, again, non-leasable, $5.6+ million deferred space. We need to do something with this. We need to not be landlords. We need to free up that space. We're going to get those assessments. We're going to think strategically about how do we keep or increase the green space while also leveraging some opportunities, right? Because we get one shot at this. To really do something like, we heard we want an Asian place. We heard from communities, we want a diverse socioeconomic status community. Let's think about those things. And we're going to do that with statewide. And my last note is, you know what makes this really hard? Is when you have a coalition spreading misinformation and not assuming good intent. We're swimming upstream with misinformation and facts, and that's really made this process difficult.
Okay, this is going to be the last. Keep the mic.
Okay.
Keep the mic.
So Joe and I are kicking everything off each other?
Yeah.
Okay, usually make
No,
this
you can,
go.
you can change seats at the break.
Okay.
It's fun.
Okay.
It's fun. I can read your name tags, and I don't even need the name tags. Okay. Tell us what you believe the borough's role in economic development should be.
Okay.
How should economic development be funded, and in
Yeah.
what amount? What would you do to ensure the long-term viability of Narberth's business corridors?
Okay, I'm glad I got this one first. So we all have kind of our passions on council, and that's a really good thing, right? Like Gene is bikes, Michael is housing, Fred is green, and I'm the NBA. The municipal government cannot impose their thoughts on what small businesses should be doing. What we can do is say, how can we use your taxpayer dollars, like your policing, like your public works, to support everything from streeteries to festivals and events. And Narberth has a long history of doing that. There's kind of in-kind donations to support economic development. Most recently in this last budget, we gave $60,000 to the NBA, which includes NARB Art, to say, we want to give you these tax dollar funds, your taxes, your funds, for you all to decide what are the resources that are going to lift you up. We've looked at economic developers, 3 times over the years. Here's what happens. You have folks come in with Main Street models. You have folks come in with bid corridor models. We have 80% of that. Right, when you hire economic consultants, they come in and say, we're going to establish a relationship so you can have an event and the municipality picks up the trash. We do all of that. The missing piece, though, that 20% is retail recruitment. We don't have many vacant storefronts. Now, 230 Haverford is vacant because it's about to come down and rebuild. And that developer has said, I don't need a retail recruiter, I have a broker. I'll tell you, if you hire a retail recruiter, they're just gonna talk to my broker. I don't anticipate an issue with open space. So we're back to that 80%. Then how do we not impose what we think small businesses should do, but rather fund with tax dollars in-kind donations and support the things? Again, we saw that in streeteries, we see that in events, etc. And I think for Narberth, that's the right size for us.
So, government has a role in making sure that the infrastructure is in place and that things are running smoothly in the downtown area. So, the bridge is a big area where we've had to work hard to make sure that the project is on track. Our manager has been meeting. Was it weekly or monthly? They've started having routine meetings with everybody involved with the bridge, which has finally gotten the bridge to the point where it's out to bid. So we're nearing the finish line of having a functional bridge, which is going to really improve the flow in and out of the downtown. We also can support downtown events. As Cindy said, we've got money in the budget that allows the NBA to help run any number of the scavenger hunts and the music festivals and all the great downtown events that go on down there. And in addition to the public art that's going in the storefronts of the windows. And we also, there is new development coming into the downtown, and that is bringing more people downtown. I mean, the Elm went up, and that's a lot more folks who are right there ready to shop in the downtown area. There are more apartments going up right now. They're being finished up and they're open for business and on top of Jenny's and on top of the other downtown spots. And ultimately, that is going to help the business community. And we hear a lot what the business community says. Well, we need more people. We need people living here. We need people walking through here. And our role as government is to try to make it easier for people to live there and make it easier for people to circulate through the downtown.
One thing just to be clear for those of you playing at home, that's Michael Gaudini. I'm Mike Salins, and we twice Michael has been referred to, and they were talking about that Michael. So I don't want to steal his thunder when they're talking about how brilliant he is. That's how we distinguish ourselves on council, so people don't get confused, so you shouldn't get confused either. I think, one of the things is we have to reiterate what Fred said, and I mentioned Michael because I'm about to cite to him. He has spent a lot of time with me. I'm not a land use person. That's not my background at all. Mike has a lot of great data about just how much foot traffic you need to have in a downtown area to make a downtown area sustainable. And we are, if you look at the graph, we're well below what the data suggests we need. So we need to figure out how to get more foot traffic into town, whether that's, I'm going to say the elephant in the room, transit-oriented development, or just making sure that we have attractive tenants coming into those businesses so that maybe we don't just have NARBs shopping NARB, but having people coming from Linwood, neighboring neighborhoods. Obviously that creates secondary issues of parking, traffic, etc. But we're going to have to figure out how to increase the foot traffic in the downtown business community. If you look at Jenny's, there are a lot of people showing up at Jenny's by car. They are not just NARBs. And you hope that showing up at Jenny's means that the parents eventually are going to cross the street when 230 Haverford is built and shop over there, and they're going to make an afternoon of it and hit the stores just like in the old days when I'd go to Mapes and then I'd go over to Rickland's and then I'd stop and pick up my dry cleaning and then I'd go to the next spot, right? And it wouldn't just be a run downtown and do one thing, but actually shop in 4 or 5 places at once. We're going to have to get there, and we're going to have to be very deliberate about how we get there.
There have been so many great things that have been said. Am I holding this too close to my mouth, Georgette? Okay, thanks. So many great things said about the role of government, the role of borough council, and the work that's being done. I won't repeat those. To answer the specific question of what would I do, it's really to continue what I currently do, which is to sell Narberth. And what I mean by that is making sure friends, neighbors, families know we've got a great Vietnamese restaurant, Thai restaurant, Indian restaurant, and we've got Get Cafe, and to just make sure that people in my social network know to come here and invite them to join, and then they go and they shop at Sweet Mabel's and many of the other shops. And so that's it's not what would I do as a borough council member, which I don't want to repeat all that's been said so well, but what would I do? It's what I love doing is, come on people, come here, it's an amazing place to come. Not too many people, but really to just sell the great things that are here in Narberth and make sure that people are aware of it. And my kids always buy me things from Sweet Mabel's every Christmas, and and just other things like that. It's just so many great opportunities here that it's really important for all of us to make sure that our networks know about. Thank you.
Can I
Okay.
answer that, bud?
It is now 8:10. Oh, I'm sorry. Dana, would you like to make a comment? Sure.
I know you said it was council, and so I passed the mic. I try to follow the rules. I can't.
Go for it.
So this is actually part of my platform and part of what I want to do and what I want to help bring. I can't allocate money. I can't do some of the things that some of the council members can. But what I can do is kind of bring my experience and bring sort of like my whole self into this. I've been 27 years at various levels of businesses, from helping run very large Fortune 500, Fortune 100 businesses, all the way down to where I work today at a little place called Simply Business, where we help small businesses stay insured so that they, continue on. So I've got like a lot of business background that I want to bring to that. So let me just, I'll start there. The next piece of what I would say of what I want to do and help is kind of what I'm already doing. I'm not mayor yet. I hope I get elected. I don't, I see it in my future. But I'm already reaching out to the businesses, reaching out to new businesses, reaching out to business associations around, the Ardmore Business Association, different places around, different committee members from Democratic Committee that are involved in different businesses, and try to figure out what can we do to get that foot traffic to work. Foot traffic in general, getting people there. I've reached out to the main developer downtown, set up a relationship with him. He's pretty clear that I'm going to advocate for the people of Narberth, but at the same time I'm going to bring back kind of like what is he doing, what are his challenges, and so I'm really happy that there's going to be a brand new restaurant opening up soon. I can't say what it is, but it's a nice Middle Eastern restaurant over here in the Old Ricklands, and you get those sort of pieces of information by talking to the people and getting people excited about it. The other thing I would say is during that period, during March, when I was being poked, prodded, vetted for the job during the endorsement and meeting different people in Narberth, I went to about 250 to 300 houses, and getting from those individuals and those families for what they wanted to see downtown was really helpful, really useful to the developer. He wanted to see what it was. So when his broker is ready to start, getting businesses in, I'm going to be right there knocking on their door saying, hey, can you talk to these people? I have these connections, what can we go do? And there's a common theme with me. It's like, let's just go do something. Like, let's make it happen. What the people told me they wanted, I'm just reporting what they said. Number one, they want a restaurant. Well, you're going to get a new restaurant, right? That's great news. They want a grocery store. Don't know what we can do about that. I'm just relaying what people said they wanted. And then third was sort of places for kids. It was tied between two things: places for kids and like a CrossFit or like a gym type thing. So getting that information, talking to the people, bringing that back to council, bringing it to the developer, their broker, everyone kind of involved, and like creating a positive set of momentum around that. That's what you're going to get from me. I'm really excited about it. I think it's important to have a thriving downtown. That takes a lot of things. It takes people, it takes parking, it takes the businesses, it takes, for the global and local economy all to pick up. So I know you wanted that for council, but I felt like I had a lot of passion around it. I just wanted to relay that to you, and I'll take more questions on it.
Okay, we're now at almost 8:15. We're going to take a short break. I have 5 pages of questions, but I'm going to limit myself to about 15 more minutes, and then we're going to open it up to the floor, because we got a number of questions in on the website, and I want to make sure that I ask those questions so that those people feel heard. Okay, time to stretch. We'll convene in 5 minutes, so get some lemonade.
Yeah.
That's what they call it. As opposed to teasing and hazing.
They both work.
Okay, welcome back. I want to ask you questions that came through our website. And I'm going to ask these because they sort of go together. The first question is, as the federal government demands cooperation from local law enforcement in service of detaining and deporting immigrants, how will you navigate this with our local police force? What would you do to protect our residents who are immigrants or those who are here on long-term visas? And that's for everybody, even though the mayor is in charge of the police department. All right, where's the mic? All right, Fred.
All right, I'll say that local police do not have a role in immigration enforcement, and I think our police chief is very clear on the fact that local police do not have a role in immigration enforcement. If the federal government shows up here, that is their right, but our local police are not going to be involved with that process. And as for how we can protect immigrants, I mean, I urge, there's not that much the council can do. I mean, I've confirmed with our borough manager that we don't maintain any information on immigration status in any of our databases. So there's no way that any information that we have, you know, could be used against residents. But that is something that all of you need to work with. You know, somebody who is here on a green card, somebody who's here on a visa. You know, work with them and help them to understand their rights and make sure that they know what kind of legal help they can get. And because that's the kind of information we don't want to have. We don't want to be storing information. We don't want to have records about our residents who are here, who are not citizens, who are on a green card or something, because that's dangerous to keep that kind of record with this kind of government. So that's what I would say is I would encourage community members to reach out. And really at this point, they just want to know that you are looking out for them and you are supporting them. And I think that'll be very helpful in this time.
One of the first things we did when some of these executive orders came down, and we didn't do this publicly very purposely, is Fred and I met with Maggie and said exactly that. Do we have citizenship data that is accessible to folks? And let's go through all of our grants. Is there anything where DEI could be a threat and pull federal funding? And we didn't make that public because we didn't want to call attention to it. I want to speak a little bit about immigration because we also had a conversation with John String. Andrea and I co-developed this idea of a chief of police and director of public health and safety. And that dual role attracted a unicorn in policing, and that is John String. You have a police chief who has not been emboldened to get the illegals out of Narberth. You have a police chief that during his interview cited Val Arkush, a public health administrator, and thanked her for her service during COVID. That is antithetical to the policing culture. So when you ask what have we done, we were really lucky enough to hire John String. And again, someone that is going to obviously uphold if there is a warrant, but otherwise protect the citizens broadly, regardless of their citizenship status in this borough.
Yeah, I think those are very, very well said. It's very, very well said. It's really important to know that, first on a personal note, I think it's absurd. I think what he's doing, or what he has enacted, what President Trump has enacted is just wrong on so many levels. I just need to say that, put that out there. That is my opinion. You know, hearing a language that someone speaks and then determining that they shouldn't be in the country, that is just, it's wrong on so many levels. Sorry, I feel like I've said it 3 times. I don't think I can say it enough. The next point I would say is, you know, Fred's right. The local police don't have a role in that. In situations where a warrant comes up, I am confident that John String would do the right thing. And so I stand behind him. He is the kind of person who, as Cindy was alluding to, is really good at their job, understands all the different facets, but he also understands the human aspect, and that's really important. You know, putting in programs to take care of the police force, putting in programs to make sure that the citizens see the new directives that exist, and he has my full confidence, and I know he has full confidence from Borough Council that he's not going to participate in that, and if a warrant comes in, he'll do the right thing. So, thanks.
I wholeheartedly agree with all that has been said, and agree especially with our role as residents and citizens in Narberth, residents of Narberth, of our role in looking out for our neighbors and protecting and making sure our neighbors are protecting themselves. I won't take more time. Let me pass along to Mike.
Yeah, I don't know what to add except for one correction. I don't think we were lucky to get John String. We attracted John String. Mm-hmm. I think, fair. Right? Yeah. And we hired, I didn't hire, but you guys hired John String knowing the kind of person he was. And we did that on civil service too. Our police officers absolutely reflect our community values. You know, I still remember interviewing Casey, and you know, he was the person who said when they asked about de-escalation, if anybody wanted to take de-escalation, my hand shot up. That's who we are. We don't escalate, we de-escalate. And John String and the rest of the police force, you know, I have no doubt that they reflect our values in this regard, and they will do, if faced with the conundrum, which I pray that they never will, but if they are faced with the conundrum, they will, you know, look to us to protect them, just as they protect us from any adverse action taken by the federal government to the extent that we can protect them.
Okay, hold on to the mic. I'm going to try to combine a couple of questions here.
Excuse me.
Okay. There were 3 people that hit the website that wanted to ask about affordable housing in Narberth.
Here.
And I'm going to try to summarize the questions. So one of the questions was what housing policies, including rent and/or rent control and/or stabilization, would you support to make housing more accessible to residents in Narberth? Another was, what is your view about transit-oriented development and 4-story apartment buildings? Another one was that there's a high percentage of rental units in Narberth, now approaching 50%, and we do not have any landlord regulations or requirements to protect tenants and collect fees and taxes. What do you think should be done to protect our large population of renters and collect revenues from landlords?
I can almost predict who asked each of those questions. And during the break, ironically,
Well, there are 3 different people.
I know, so I can predict all 3. But during the break, I was talking to these folks over here about affordable housing. Affordable housing is a passion of mine. I'm surprised it sort of didn't come up before now. My mother was actually an affordable housing advocate on Long Island and did some pretty remarkable things to, I want to call it, and I prefer workforce housing, make sure our teachers, you know, wouldn't it be nice if our police officers could have lived in our community, our teachers, other folks, the people who work in our shops, etc. We also have to be concerned about senior housing. Narberth Ambulance will tell you, their reports will tell you the #1 calls in Narberth are not for heart attacks. They are for slip and falls of people of a certain population falling in their house. We need to figure out, and I'm a big believer, and I'm, you know, part of transit-oriented development for me is making sure that we have affordable housing, however we can figure it out, especially for our senior citizens who want to stay in Narberth, who have lived here their whole life. There are creative ways to do that. I think we really have to work very hard, and I will certainly, if elected to a full term, will work very hard on that issue. It is not easy. I saw my mother struggle for 20 years doing it. But I am committed to really trying hard to come up, probably not through rent stabilization. Like I don't think we're going to be in a position to, you know, have, you know, rent controlled apartments, but we can have, hopefully have the market take care of itself. And if you didn't watch our meeting last month or 2 weeks ago, when we talked about transit-oriented development, I encourage you to do so because we discuss this at great length amongst ourselves. And I think it would be useful for all of you to see that.
Such an important topic. And I was really thrilled by, as I was attending Borough Council 2 weeks ago, to see that it was discussed with great depth and interest and an important approach to thinking through various aspects of it. I share the passions that Mike described as well, and the real commitment and interest, as I mentioned early on, about aging in place, and also making sure that Narberth is a community that's accessible to people of many different income strata. And I look forward to taking this passion and pursuing it and looking into, what, from a zoning perspective and other perspectives, building perspectives, how can we, how can I, as a member of Borough Council, work to make things more accessible, more affordable, so that we can increase the diversity of our housing options.
Okay. So these are really actually kind of 4 discrete questions, so I'm going to try to answer them the best that I can. I think we should be careful when we talk about affordable housing, attainable housing, workforce housing, and diversity of housing, because I think we're talking about some different things, right? My daughter would love to return to Narberth. She is a public school teacher. She is not going to qualify on an income supported, like attainable or workforce houses. So I would differentiate that into a diversity of housing market, right? She wants to buy something and build equity, not rent an apartment. Those are 2 different conversations. I am for transit-oriented density. However, as I said at the last meeting, I think it should be iterative. We have 100+ apartments happening in the interior of our borough. I would like us to pause, wait and evaluate, see the impact on the parking, the streets, the people, and then evaluate, and then look to, do we need to change zoning? What does that look like? 198 Elmwood, I mean, let's call it, that's what we're looking at, right? Is there something between $1.2 million single homes and that missing middle housing where folks can build equity at the beginning of their housing market and at the end of their housing market? I'm interested in a diversity of housing options, rentals, and an opportunity for folks to build equity. Look, I'm an outlier. I don't like 4 stories on the interior. The Elm is magnificent. Every time I walk by, I say it's 1 story too high. Okay, again. Montgomery Avenue, that might be really appropriate, 4 stories in Montgomery Avenue. I personally do not. I would like to keep it 3 stories in the interior of Narberth. The rental code enforcement, I think we have a moral obligation. If we're going to continue to increase rental apartments, then we need to build the capacity to have someone to enforce the codes and make sure folks are living safely in those apartments.
I'll say that fundamentally I think that the housing prices are increasing just because Narberth is such a great place to live. I mean, it's between, not only the small town feel, but the fact that we're in the Lower Merion School District, that we're so close to Philly, and that we're right on the train line. I mean, these are advantages that they're great, they're not going to go away. And prices, people are going to continue to want to come to Narberth because of all these factors. And it's not just us, the surrounding Lower Merion area is also seeing the same kinds of pressures. I would say council can support this. Right now, we've got we created a historic district throughout much of Narberth. That means that a lot of the houses, the single family houses, can't be torn down and can't be replaced either by a McMansion. I think that was the original worry, was that people were tearing down a lot of our historical houses and just replacing them with giant new single family houses, which nobody except for the developers is excited about. But it also limits the ability to put up any kind of low-rise building there. I think council's role is to generally encourage ADUs. We have legislation for ADUs, accessory dwelling units. They haven't really been popular so far. We're looking to seeing what might help people put up these units or turn your garage into housing for your aging parents or something. Make it easier for conversions of existing houses into multifamily uses, and support development in the downtown, which is really where it's possible and where it is wise. I mean, I've said this before. I think that the Montgomery Avenue corridor and the downtown are where we should be having significant new buildings go up, and where we should be having apartments or large mixed-use buildings, and that's what we're seeing. The former Albrecht space, the Elm, the Elm is their favorite building in all of Narberth, and they did a report on it for school. I wouldn't go that far, but I'm very pleased with the way the Elm turned out, and I like the way 650 Montgomery, the new building in the former Albrecht is turning out. I think that it's bringing a lot of great business and hopefully a lot of exciting residents. And I think we should be doing what we can to encourage more development on the train lines, on and around the train line, and help people live as car-free existence as possible here in Narberth, because that does reduce the demand on our streets, reduces the demand on our parking when people are taking the train all the time and people are walking to do all their shopping. So I'm a proponent of transit-oriented development.
Okay. I have plenty more questions, but we're going to throw this open to the floor. So if you want to ask a question, I'm going to move in just a second so that I don't block you. You can ask your question to any of the members or everybody. So Ryan, you have the floor.
I'm going to shoot this one to both Fred and Cindy. I'm going to shoot this one to both Fred and Cindy. With the business district and now with the bank being gone now, what are you going to do when you get reelected with the timeline with this developer? And now also the train line maybe done cutting service.
Sure. I mean, I think we're all really hopeful that SEPTA gets adequately funded through the state, and if it looks like SEPTA is in serious funding trouble, I think we would add our voices to the chorus. I'm sure there's going to be lots of other affected communities who are going to be telling the state government, hey, you need to fund SEPTA. We already have. Yes, we did. For a resolution last time SEPTA was in trouble. So we're hopeful that the SEPTA funding situation will resolve itself. As for making sure the development goes through on a regular timeline, the borough office is mostly responsible for keeping an eye on development and for enforcing deadlines and for making sure that really what they can make sure that happens is that the sidewalks and the outward improvements, the things that like the public is going to encounter as you walk around town, making sure that those are safe and making sure that those are secure, making sure that the sidewalks aren't torn up and in pieces, and that it's safe to walk through the downtown. And we can also, like I said, work with the public art to keep, Cindy's going to talk about the public art.
That's a great question, Ryan. And not to spoil the NBA, but they're going to come to our next meeting. So we're in constant conversation with Tim Rubin on how this transition of our town is going to happen, and it's going to hurt for a while. I mean, we should be honest about that. Tim has agreed to give NARB our kind of carte blanche access, much like he has with the vacant windows, to have that kind of found art destination to all of the construction site, and Emily Stewart is totally on that. Additionally, part of those funds that I referenced earlier, the NBA is soliciting a social media, actually hiring someone to do social media and update the website, and they envision doing events almost every Friday. They've said like flamethrowers, and then incorporate that in a social media to attract, I know, they did flamethrower was one, it was not my example, but to bring folks outside of Narberth into the town to really increase that foot traffic. And I think that's the most that we can do in that time is us as council, aside from, again, enforcing code and timelines. Dana spoke to being the cheerleader of Narberth, of saying if there was ever a time to be a citizen shopper, it's going to be in the next 2 years in Narberth. I know,
Would
flamethrower was an
anyone else
example.
like to comment? You can if you want, but you don't have to.
Super fast. I would say I love that you brought up the bank. That is, I will say that is going to be a separate standalone project, and I've been assured that it's on a faster timeline. I don't know the timeline, but let's let's give some positive energy and flow to that, because it should be done on a faster timeline.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Martin Harrell. I am Joe's neighbor, so I'm here to say what a collegial guy he is, particularly when it comes to gardening and just neighborhood stuff. And I always see him out there talking to everybody. So he has my vote. My questions, and as Joe told me like an hour and a half ago, I could come and ask as many questions as I wanted, which I won't do. But I don't have a firm position on the whole Sabine Park thing, because I don't know enough about it. But a lot of municipalities, mostly townships, put referendums out for special taxes devoted to open space development. Is this something council has considered? And if not, what is your position when you get whatever data you're waiting for about putting that to a vote of Narberth property owners who will, well, I guess not property owners, but all residents who will have to pay the freight, to see if they're willing to pay the freight for corner-to-corner development?
That's a great question.
Yeah, so it's a great question. We've thought about it. So in Pennsylvania, you can't have a referendum on just any issue. Like we couldn't put up a vote that says, you know, should we do X or Y with Sabine Park? What we could do is say, should the borough take out up to $5 million in debt to do this at Sabine Park? Or, as Martin suggested, should the borough take out an extra, it would be an EIT, it would be in addition to the EIT. Should we add an extra 0.25% to the EIT to use for parks and open space maintenance? Yeah, it's a possibility, and once we have a better sense of costs, I think, you know, I mean, it's kind of punting, right? It's saying we're not making that decision. We're going to let the community make that decision. So that's what we'd be weighing. You know, is it our job to make that decision? Is it our job to make the tough decisions, or should we pass it to the community? So that's kind of what we're weighing when we're thinking about that. But yeah, it is a good idea. It would be a way to make it a community process.
Can I answer that real quickly? Because again, we have constraints on what we can put in the ballot, but you bring up a good point, because people say, save Sabine, I want it all green space, and I say, okay, that's great, but you do realize, Fred did these calculations, not me. We would have to raise property taxes 13%, right, to everyone, just to maintain that green open space. Now, you all said in the comprehensive plan in 2016 that you wanted to support aging in place. Well, I do have a problem, and I think we have a responsibility to say, if that's a community goal of aging in place, I want to be sure that, Georgette, I'm going to use it as an example. You know, Georgette, you're retired, I'm going to raise your property taxes 13%. That may not aid you in aging in place. So there's lots of considerations that I do think it's appropriate for council who has that larger Zoom to consider. And folks don't know they want the green open space, but they don't understand it's at quite a cost to everyone.
I'll just, if I can, I mean, I think this is part of the reason why, you know, getting the data is so important at the front end. The second really important piece of that is sharing the data and making sure the community understands. You know, it's very easy to put up a sign that says, we want a park corner to corner. And I'll reiterate, we all would love a park corner to corner. There is a cost, and the public has a right to know, I feel very strongly about this, what we are giving up in exchange for having a park corner to corner, and how much that's going to be, and what the implications are for Georgia, for me soon, you know, not before long, I'm going to want to age in place. I guess I'm we're all aging in place, I guess. But, you know, we have to, part of our job here is, if we're going to referendum, we've got to make sure that we are communicating with all of you every single implication that relates to that issue. One of the things that we actually talked about last week, Katie Steen, who's not here, when we were talking about transit-oriented development, suggested to us that we basically do a town hall. And I thought that was a great idea, and I talked to Michael about that to say, you know, we sat in the Greeks and he gave me 3 hours worth of data over probably one too many beers from my perspective, but he needs to share that with the community as a whole. we need to do a better job of informing everyone. And I think if there's a flaw in what's happened with Sabine so far, it's that nobody's talking to the other side. You know, they're just digging, trying.
I would disagree with that.
I've been trying very hard to talk to folks, you know, and I'll tell this anecdote. There's something rotten in the state of Denmark when somebody posts and says they're going to tear down these cherry trees that were planted by President Harrison's wife. And I say, I'm going to go for a walk because I want to know what she's talking about. And I said, can you come and point out those cherry trees to me? And I'm told, talk to the lawyer for Sabine Coalition. Really? We as neighbors can't go for a walk together and just point out what we're talking about without going through the neighbors? That's a problem. That's a personal problem for me. I think it's a problem for other people on the side. It's very hard to have a rational conversation when you can't even have a conversation. And I would implore the people who are screaming at us week after week after week to reconsider from their perspective whether they just need to keep saying talk to the lawyers or they need to come have a cup of beer or a coffee with me at Get. Anytime, any place, without the lawyers.
Beer and data.
Beer and data.
Well, but we should know, I'm sorry, we should know, folks, there's a whole website with all of the Sabine data we have online. So this is not non-transparent. I mean, it has been from the beginning. I mean, we have an assessment that we've asked for, but aside from that, every piece of data is on our webpage. You just have to look for it.
I didn't see anybody else come up, so that's why I circled around to give you a chance. These are infrastructure questions I think are sort of related. With regards to approving new projects, the property that's at the former Ricklands seems to be way behind schedule. Is there anything council can do to put in, I won't say occupancy deadlines, but completion deadlines, because that place is not completed, and the signs that's promised spring of whatever have come and gone. So, and my other infrastructure question is when Pico or Aqua embark on massive excavations, which I think we all agree are needed, whose responsibility is it to fix the streets? There's the rough coat that goes in the day of, and then there's what I call the finish coat, which really isn't a finish coat. But what cost does the borough, when it's in the borough, incur in that process?
Yeah, so when the utilities come in and tear up the streets, it's their responsibility to fix it. And they can either fix it or they can pay us and then have us do the job later on. But it is not the borough, is the answer. It's the utility company. Okay, the other question about the building, I think that the apartments are currently being rented, right?
Yeah.
So the apartments are finished. The building itself, there should be an announcement of a tenant soon. There's been a tenant, it's been alluded to earlier, there should be an announcement soon and it's just being fitted out. As for what the borough can do, under Pennsylvania law, you have a really long time to do construction projects. Once you're approved, I think it's 5 years. So legally, we don't have a lot we can do. What we can do is make sure that there's nothing stopping it on our end. So making sure that all the permits are in order and that they know clearly what the borough needs them to do. They also have to maintain the sidewalks and the exterior condition that people can walk across it. But the interior work, they really have a lot of leeway under the law. So we do what we can to speed things up on the borough's end, but the developer has a lot of leeway. Anybody else want to talk briefly?
I mentioned this during the break. We did, for 230 Haverford, we imposed a lot of conditions on the developer. And one of the conditions was that he could not start on 230 Haverford until he finished all the outside work, anything that would obstruct the public, the sidewalks, etc., on the two other properties. So we did create an incentive for him to push those projects along, because he can't start across the street until he at least finished the outside part. So we're creative in that regard.
Okay, Georgette.
So, lower would be good. I have a question that occurred to me to bring up here. Is there anything that Borough Council or Borough Government can do about contractors who come into Narberth and make a point of trying to scam, especially older people, to do work on their houses? And I don't know how much you've heard of this, but having encountered this myself, and then Joe knows about somebody else in our neighborhood who was approached by these people and pressured to have work done, and they're basically criminals. I mean, once I started researching the way these things should operate, I realized everything that by law should be done wasn't. And they're very intimidating. And so I'm curious, first of all, if any of you have heard of any of these situations?
Thanks, Georgette. I took this on, and I'm not on Borough Council, so I took it on as just a resident of Narberth to read up on the ordinance. There's an ordinance that anybody soliciting, you can solicit, you can approach people, solicit for religious purposes or for election purposes, but anything else requires a permit. Is that, I'm correct on that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you have freedom of expression for a lot of these things, but for anything commercial, you have to have a permit.
So people are required to get a permit from the borough, and they need to carry that with them. Many people don't get that. As a good neighbor who lives on a corner and sees a lot of this happen, I'll approach people as they're going up. I'm not saying this is what we should all do, but this is just what I do. I'll approach people and say, hi, what's happening? They're like, oh, we're just, going to help people improve their landscaping, stucco, roof, whatever it is. And I'll say, oh, that's great. Do you have a permit? And often they'll say, I do. I say, can I see it? It's in the car. I said, well, let's go get it. And then this is addressing my approach to your question. I will let them know, gosh, there's a big fine if you don't have that, and try to be, their friend. Like, oh, I just want to protect you from a big fine, and then if people persist, I'll call the police. And when I've called the police, they've been incredibly responsive, and then I'll describe who the people are, what they're wearing, and it's something that any of us as citizens, residents, can do. If somebody approaches us, knocks on our door, you don't have to do all the Joe Stratton things. You can call the police, and what they're doing is illegal.
Well, that's just the solicitation part, but what they do is they target older people who they assume may have some retirement money, and this is exactly how they got me. They first just walked up. It was a guy with a little kid and said they were doing driveways in the area, and I said, well, actually, I'd probably be more interested in having like the stone and my bricks repointed and all that. So anyway, it was horrible. I went to the state attorney general, and they wouldn't do anything other than they would mediate. But these people initially wanted to charge me $62,000 to do the ground level of a twin house. So that's 3 walls with windows and doors of brick. And they were very intimidating, and they kept hammering at me when I said, they came down to $42,000, and then were insisting that I needed to come up with the money, and I said, I don't know, I'd have to get a loan, I don't have that money, and it was an absolute nightmare. And then they managed to do it to someone around the corner from me a couple of years later, and just probably, what, a year or two ago, they were doing work at this other place, and the guy saw me and came out and put his hand out like he wanted to shake my hand, which I was not going to do. And he said, he started yelling at me and saying that I was a con artist, that he was going to write to all my neighbors about me because I ended up paying them a chunk of money, but not what they were asking. I couldn't have done that. But it's really scary. And then I was seeing their trucks. They had new trucks going around in Narberth to solicit business. And I was looking at the truck, and the windows were tinted, and the guy rolled down the window, and they all have Irish accents. And so I knew immediately it was that company. And sure enough, he gave me a card from that company, and they're back in Narberth. But this was a couple of years ago. So I don't know if they were driven out. I also saw one of the guys, I swear, who worked on my house at the building we're talking about on the corner, one of the two that isn't completed, and I realized, I knew they stole my ladder when they left. So I looked, and the ladder has all these paint streaks on it. And the guy had my ladder. I mean, it's just like, it's freaky stuff that is hard to believe, but I have never known what to do about it, or how, like, is there anything that can be done?
But I think
I'd be happy to say the name of the company. It's called Quality Paving. And they have like fake addresses and all kinds of stuff. And they have 50, when I was dealing with them, they had 50 reviews of their work on their website, and every one was 5 stars. Very, very impressive. And pictures of all this great work they did. And when I finally then was going back and sort of researching these people, I realized that 10 of the pictures on the website were the same place, taken from different angles, and probably wasn't their work anyway, so.
first off, I'm really sorry that happened. That's it's close to home because it also happened to us. My approach was probably less polite than yours. We'll leave it at
You don't
that.
want to hear what I finally said to them when I
Then
said,
we did the
"Get
same
out of
thing."
my house." When I said, "Get out of my house," there was also a word in there that I won't hear. And then I went and called the police, and the police came, and they told them, you cannot talk with her, you cannot email her, like finish what you're doing and go. So
I'm really sorry it happened, and I appreciate the story, and I appreciate you bringing it up, and thankfully this is being broadcast, and we're going to do even better at this when I'm mayor. So I've been in a lot of different roles, and in some of those roles I've been associated with law enforcement, physical security, information security, different types of things like that. And the one thing, anytime you talk to anyone who wears a badge of some sort, whether it be local or FBI or whatever, it's the same thing you see on the wall in the Tube in London. If you see something, say something. And I think that it's a really good time to point out that in each of the Narberth newsletters and in different campaigns, the way that works here in Narberth is to call 911. It's really, you call 911 for anything. You got a dead fox in your yard, you call 911. You got quality paving comes by, or these people come up, you call 911. And you have to be just really diligent about it. When I grew up, you called 911 if someone was waving a gun or something. But here, you do it for just everything. And so we're going to do even better at getting that word out. I'm sorry that happened to you, but just for everyone watching online, for everybody in here, if you see something, say something, call 911 immediately, and the John String will do a great job of making sure that's not a repeat thing.
yeah, I think this was before him, and
we're really lucky to have him because he has been just beating that into people and making sure it's in there. Yeah. Sorry, Georgia.
I just want to make sure everybody here knows that the Civic Association usually once a year does a meeting with the mayor and the chief of police. We sponsor that and get the word out about it. And so I'm totally aware of, yes, you call 911. You don't wait till somebody's going to break your door down or something. And so you don't try to get to the office. You don't try to call the office number. Just call 911. Good advice.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Ryan.
My next question for Borough Council is all the congestion that backs up North Wynwood Road right now. Is there anything we could do to relieve that congestion to let the people out on Haverford?
The snarky response is to get all your friends in Lower Merion to convince their commissioners to allow us to have a traffic circle at the corner of Wynwood and Wynwood, right? Because we wanted that, we asked for that, and they refused to work with us to get it. We talk about this public health and safety. For me, it's not even the inconvenience of like standing in that ridiculously long line spewing out gas fumes. I am terrified that there's going to be a fire somewhere and the fire department is not going to be able to get through in a timely fashion because of that backup. You know, I avoid that intersection at all costs now. I go around onto Windsor because I don't think it's a safe intersection anyway. But, you know, not to be snarky, but we have a solution. It is a clean, easy, and obvious solution. Unfortunately, it requires Lower Merion's cooperation, and they won't give it to us. So you need to talk to your friends who live over there, who probably don't suffer in the same way we do from the spillover consequence of it. But until they engage us, there isn't really
The bridge.
the bridge. I mean, obviously, when the bridge is open again, but that's not going to happen in the short term.
And thank goodness that you all purchased 3 Elmwood, because if that development had happened, what a cluster what that would be.
And we did ask PennDOT to look into changing the timing on that light to make it a longer in the north-south direction. But that's also a long process, trying to get their attention and trying to get them to listen to our requests. So we've been trying. I think, as people said, once the bridge is back up, that'll relieve a lot of the pressure, but that's still several years out. So.
Okay, does anybody else have a question from the floor? Come on up. Please identify yourself and...
Hello, my name is Sean Malloy. I moved to Narberth in August, though I did grow up here on the south side. I'm unfortunately a north sider now, turn sides. I'm actually very delighted that a lot of the questions I had in mind have really been brought up already and been answered in a great deal of agreement. I love hearing that we're driving decisions with data. I really love hearing that we're trying to lower the ladder back down a bit. So someone like my grandfather, who was a factory worker and lived on Dudley Avenue, could move to Narberth in 2025. So with sort of what I had in mind now gone, and impressed as I've been by the accordance here at everyone, I just sort of want to ask about where we do disagree, out of curiosity, simply to get to know the members of the council more. Recognizing that I think at 95% of the time, everyone's on the same page, and I love that. I used to be a dean of students, and the fun part of that job was making a decision that was great for a school, but 2 angry parents showed up, and you had a 4-hour meeting that had a lot of volume to it. And I know that that's a large part of what you do, making decisions that benefit a whole town. And even if it's one person who is upset with that, that could be your whole afternoon gone. And that's very intimidating, that's very influential. So I'm curious, what initiatives, projects, decisions, even just platforms, personally, do you feel most strongly about Narberth that you think is going to see the largest number of angry people through your door?
So say the most unpopular thing we can. That's what you're asking.
Yeah.
huh?
That you
Let me
would
think
like,
about that.
not, this isn't a competition,
Yeah.
I'll come back to
that
it.
you support.
I'm gonna get this way first.
You can also, it's
Wait,
a bit of
this
a
is-
minefield.
This is like the late night questions. Parking is the number one issue in Narberth. Like, what a privileged community are we that this is the number one issue. And I say that truly, like, not to be snarky. I mean, how many other communities would trade with this being our number one issue? How we handle then differences in opinion on that is what I hear you asking, and how do I handle that? What's my perspective on parking? Is that how I'm, okay.
Yes.
And I think parking goes with density too, right? Because we talk about both of those. As I said tonight, I said at length at our last meeting was, I really subscribe to, this is massive change in the history of Narberth, and it being calculated, thoughtful, iterative, and evaluative. With that said, I believe we should be making evidence-based decisions. I also think we have to balance that with the fact that we are voted in by our neighbors and residents, and their opinion matters. And Bob Weisbord and I used to have this debate all the time. Do people elect us to make good decisions, or do people elect us to represent their needs and wants? And I think that it is a hybrid, right? That has to be a careful calculation, and that's how I approach it. What's the data and the evidence? What are my neighbors telling me? Who wants it?
I agree. Cindy said it so well. I absolutely agree. And I think, additionally, as an observer of Borough Council, I think all of us have, not all of us, people within government have, in addition to everything that Cindy said, things that they are passionate about individually. And how does any group work together with making decisions that are, at times we need to put our individual passions aside, I believe, or think about how do we influence different decisions that are made with what's best for the community, what are our residents, neighbors, what do they want and need, and what is it that Joe Stratton wants to accomplish. That should be number 3, I think, in that.
I thought you were going somewhere else, which is what amongst us do we disagree with?
That's
Oh, no, not so much, no.
Oh, okay.
That's what I,
Okay.
yeah.
So, but I think that's important. So I'm going to answer both. I think 201 Sabine is the obvious. We're going to make half the people in this town unhappy no matter what we do. Maybe 3/4 of the town. Different 3/4 depending on what we pick. You have to make hard choices that reflect the community standards. And sometimes you're not going to make everybody happy. The best advice my mother ever gave me, I can't quote it exactly because there's a bad word involved, but I remember in high school being really upset because somebody I was friendly with got mad at me, and my mother said, "Michael, if everybody likes you, you're a schmuck." It's great advice, right? We're here to make hard decisions, and we're going to have to make hard decisions in the very near future. That's going to make some people unhappy. If we raise their taxes because we're saving Sabine, some people are going to be unhappy. If we build on Sabine, some people are going to be unhappy. Physicians say do no harm. We're going to do harm. We're going to do harm to somebody. It's just going to happen. It comes with the territory. And maybe that's why it's hard to get people to sit up here and not sit out there. We do have internal disagreements. I think Cindy and I are probably at one end of the spectrum on what the transit-oriented development and what those limits should look like. I didn't get to say before, you're going to have to convince me really hard that transit-oriented development requires a 4th story. I'm not prepared to go there. I'm not convinced that the data is there yet. And other people feel differently. I am not in favor of mixed-use development on Sabine. I know other people are willing to entertain that. I'd rather see that go, if we're going to develop that property, I'd rather see it go into some sort of middle level housing. If we're going to do anything with that property at all. I have pushed, I don't want to make this sound like I'm criticizing people, but I have said it over and over and over again, and I will continue to say it till I'm blue in the face. Just because we have the right to go into executive session doesn't mean we should go into executive session. And I have been outvoted on this a couple of times, particularly with Sabine. I think it's such an important thing to our community as a whole that every single discussion we should have, except when we're actually negotiating dollars and cents lease terms for our tenants, should be in public. And I feel really strongly about that, and I'm going to continue to press my fellow council folks that from this point forward, and you have my pledge that if I'm elected, I'm going to continue to be a pain in the butt to the rest of council. I shouldn't point down the road because that's not fair. To the rest of council until I get 4 votes to have those conversations in public. Every single one of them.
Thank you.
Like, not everybody likes to see how the sausage is made. I'm one of those people, but not everybody does.
Not everybody thinks that the sausage should be seen to be made, and we can respect that. I disagree.
We're pretty careful about executive session, which is reserved. There's state law only allows certain discussions to be in executive session. A lot of these are personnel matters. That we don't want to talk about every single thing that's going on with borough employees in public. Other, real estate transactions, potential lawsuits, that sort of thing. So, and we're guided by our solicitor who tells us this is appropriate for executive session. This is not appropriate for executive session. We can't take votes, so it is it's already pretty circumscribed. I guess going back to the original question, I would say that there's a discussion a lot about the trade-off between pedestrian and bicycle uses and car uses, particularly of the downtown area, new construction. And I think there's council members who are very eager to see more multimodal transportation in the downtown, more support for it throughout the borough. And there's council members who are very interested in preserving parking and making sure that cars have an easier time of getting downtown. So that's a situation where residents, I think, have strong feelings. I mean, there's a lot of people who want to make sure that the parking situation in the downtown, we maintain as many parking spaces as we can. And then there are other visions that involve pedestrianizing Station Circle, or just making bike lanes in the downtown area, making it more multimodal. And that's still a conflict that we haven't fully resolved. So.
Not on council, but sort of. I sit in the room sometimes, or I will be sitting in the room sometimes. I would say something that I've noticed that we're, in talking to the people and then listening to kind of the government, I'd say, is that I'm not sure everybody agrees that communication is good, even though it has gone up. I'm not sure that it's two-way, which is very important. I hope to make that better, hope to be part of that solution. But I would say that we starting next, we being me starting next year, we should be really looking at that and make sure that that is actually happening the way we think it is. And I think the second thing I would say is clarity of what's intended to get done for the year, and then figuring out how not to have really big projects or make things bigger when they're just little pieces that could be done. I'm not picking on anything in particular, just say that's what I've seen over the 4 years of kind of watching and watching the videos, attending the meetings and such. But we'll see what I think in January 1.
Thanks.
Sounds good.
I'm afraid that I'm going to bring up 201 Sabine. However, I'm going to refer to something that you said, Cindy, which is that there's so many things that could be done with that property, and so many types of people who could use it. I don't hear a lot of talk about the daycare center, for instance, keeping that. And it's got to be, I mean, that's pretty important, I believe, to our community, but I've never known how many Narberth kids go to the daycare center. There may be data that hasn't been taken here. You've done a great job financially at looking at different options, but also New Horizons, of course, is looking for a permanent home. So there's some important groups in our community that could use it. We probably don't, we certainly can benefit from a playground, but I think the big Narberth playground covers a lot of athletic events and, but there are, I hope, I mean, you and I talked about having the Narberth Theater come back, and how could that building, you know, there's so many different uses, and I don't know if there's been a lot of brainstorming. That would be a town hall kind of a thing, which would be great if that could happen. But anyway, just raise that as something that I'd love to hear discussed. And again, there'll be strong feelings, pro and con, anything you come up with, but it would be good, I think, to talk about what's possible.
We've talked about having Wonder Spring, so the daycare, be a partner in a new building. So a new building with housing on top, and Wonder Spring as a core tenant on the lower level. They've done that before. They've been a partner in a community building like that in another area. So we're looking into it. It's one of the options. Again, it's going to depend on how valuable that property is, whether it makes sense to the borough to try to get a developer to work with us to put that up. As for other community uses, I mean, I think that the current building, we've determined is just not financially feasible to keep it. So we would not be looking to turn that into a different kind of space just because it would cost too much. We'd be better off just taking, if we were going to try to get a community building, we'd be better off taking the building down and putting up a new one, which is going to be very expensive, but cheaper than trying to repurpose that building. So.
Can I speak to just the two groups that you spoke to? So, 6 or 7 years ago, we hired someone to come in and do a community survey on what they wanted to see at Sabine, and childcare was one of those top responses and how important it was to have. And something that we've considered is we actually now, since that survey, have a daycare that's opened up at 650 Montgomery. So we do have to say, okay, are those data still relevant? Because we do, in fact, have a very large daycare now. Additionally,
I'm sorry, is that a large daycare?
Yeah, it is, and I don't know number by number. I can get that size-wise, but it is much larger than you would
Yeah, it
think.
looks like a small space.
Again, I can ask the numbers so we can compare this because that's important. And then the second is New Horizons, because that's they've found a different location, but they have in Lower Merion in the Ashbridge.
Yeah, but it's Ashbridge. So
right.
It's a long ways away.
It's a long ways away, but we have also heard that they're interested in maintaining their presence here in Narberth.
Yes.
Right, and that's a really great thing because we said we wanted to age in place. So the conversation, and we were just having this in our leadership meeting today, saying how can we make sure that we can accommodate New Horizons to stay in this space and cohabitate with us here in the borough long term, because that is really important. Mm-hmm. Again, we don't have the money to do redactive reuse in Sabine, but two important things. And just to clarify too, every executive session we have about Sabine is vetted by a solicitor within the confines. I think that was a little, once she said we should have this publicly and our attorney said no, it should be. So I don't want there to be this impression that we're having these secret Sabine meetings because that's simply not accurate.
Since you mentioned the theater, and I was actually on the board of Narberth Community Theater and was partially responsible for writing a letter of interest to, I wasn't on council at the time, to council about our interest in coming back to Narberth and going to 201 Sabine. And it turned out for various reasons, the current building was not, when we actually looked at what we needed and what what we would need in the space as a whole. You know, it's not just a theater, you need space for the props and the costumes and everything else. It turned out that the current building was not suitable for various reasons for us to move forward in that interest. So, you know, as it turned out, that's a good example where, you know, if it were rebuilt, they would love to come back, especially, you know, as I'm sure you know, they're overbooked, burned down, so they're homeless and basically in an itinerant company, and I can pitch for them. The music director of the next show is sitting in the last row, so.
It premieres on May 2nd.
So I'll just give that pitch to my former theatrical home. So, you know, for us it would be, there'd have to be a new building. Yeah. And that's probably not going to happen, but that's the short answer to that.
In the couple minutes we have, I'd like to just give this point of information. When, this is probably going back, could be even 20 years, New Horizons Senior Center was told that they would be moving into the building at Sabine. And we were told, I was a volunteer there for 15 years, I don't know, a very long time. From when I was too young to join to when I was very much old enough to join. And the other thing we were told was that the elevator was put in order to be able to accommodate the senior center. And there's a whole lot of history with this. And that building is also, we were told, not New Horizons, but you know, at a meeting, we were told that that building is like the emergency center. You know, if a bomb were dropped on Narberth, everyone is supposed to go to that building. I kid you not. It's for real. And so I want to ask one quick question about the bridge. Also, I've been around here a long time, I guess 40-some years or something. And I remember in 2012 an announcement being made at a meeting, at a borough council meeting, and this was sort of like a big deal. Like, we have a date for the completion of the bridge, and it's going to be completed by 2014. So I'm just curious, is there, 2014, yeah, that was a while ago. And so I'm just curious, is there a projected completion date at this point, or not really? Thanks.
Yeah, so we're about to put it out to bid for a contractor. Contractors will submit their bids, and we'll pick a contractor. We'll pick the lowest qualified bid, as we're required to by law. It is, I think, 18 months once they're actually going to start construction. They don't have the final okay to start the actual bridge construction yet, but they would be able to start work on the utilities, and they'd be able to start work on some of the stuff outside of the bridge proper. So, what was the last quote? I don't know.
I thought the utilities could start as soon as the
Yeah.
fall,
Yeah, we're
just
not
to be
gonna
clear.
Yeah, the
And you're
utilities
not
can
gonna
start
do that.
soon, and then the other work will have to wait on Amtrak's final okay, which is
But we're on their budget.
soon. Yeah, we're budgeted. We're budgeted. So we don't have a final completion date yet. It's also going to depend on what the contractor tells us. But
And let's be clear about one other thing. We're relying on infrastructure, federal infrastructure money for this.
Oh, gosh, okay.
Yeah.
I will say that we looked, that's one of the first things Maggie did in the office is she scanned the bridge contract. And look, we don't bring up racial minorities. It supports gas guzzling cars driving right over that public transportation. So there is nothing that should alert a red flag and threaten our federal funding. We were actually really careful about even speaking out about the administration executive orders till we made sure we were okay in that space. Rich, are we doing finals?
Yeah. Okay. Let's try and limit our final statements, and then we're going to say good night. We're at 9:30, so let's go. Go ahead, Mike.
I'll keep it short. Thank you for coming out tonight. And engaged citizenry is the most important asset we have in this town. And I hope everything that I've said tonight, you might not agree with, but hopefully I've impressed you that I deserve your vote, that I'm passionate about the borough, passionate about what I'm passionate about, and I will listen and have a cup of coffee or a beer with anyone who wants to have one with me at any time. Well, not at any time. Go to bed at 10 o'clock usually. But, you know, you guys, I'm open to phone calls, whatever, to talk about how we can work together to make the borough an even better place than it is.
Just a joy to be here, and I'd really be thrilled to serve Narberth and help improve the community in any way I can. And thank you so much all for taking the time.
I've been on council 8 years, and it's an ask to ask for your support for another 4 for 12 years. That's a really long time, and I take that seriously. Recently at the Greeks, a neighbor said, hey, I won't out who it was. I have to tell you, you know, years ago, I don't know if you remember this, and I did not, we had a sewer breakup, and there was sewage and poo all over my front yard. I couldn't get help from the borough, and I called you, and then an hour later, someone came out and helped me. And I laughed and said, I actually love that as a slogan. Like, I want to be the council person that when your sewage is in your front yard and you don't know what to do, I'm the person you can call for help. And I'm usually in bed at this time, so there. I hope that I remain, if nothing else, in all seriousness, I want to be accessible to everybody, because I take that really seriously. And I thank you for considering me for another 4 years.
Yeah, just thanks to Rich, our moderator, and to the Civic Association for sponsoring this event, and thanks to everybody for coming out. It's a great bunch of people on council. I hope you'll agree with me. We've accomplished a lot, and you know, we are here to support the community, and it's always good to hear the community concerns and hear what's on the community's mind, what these questions are. People who are devoted enough and interested enough to actually write in with questions and follow through the civic process here. So I'm happy to be part of this process, and look forward to serving another term on Borough Council, if you'll have me.
Yeah, I echo everything I've heard. I really appreciate, thank you, Rich and the Civic Association, for putting this on. It's been a great 2.5 hours. I would say that, you know, I'm really excited to have my first term as mayor come up, if you'll have me. Please come out and vote. And for those of you that didn't get to ask your question or have more questions after this, my website's danaedwards.com. There's my phone number, my email, and if you send it to me, I'll answer anything I can. And one last thing, please join us on May 2nd at the Greeks. We've got another Meet the Candidate forum, and we'll take the same questions, answer them all again, or we'll answer new ones, whatever you want to do. So look forward to talking with you. Thank you again.
With
We all
beer.
forgot about that.
Yeah, with me.
Yeah.
We are very fortunate to have this group volunteer and our other council members who are in attendance tonight. We are very fortunate in this community to have such qualified and civically dedicated people on council. That's my opinion.
Back at you.